Greetings and salutations, creature lovers. This is Mr. Venom welcoming you to No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts, episode number 47. Before we start talking about this month's movie, let me go ahead and introduce my cohorts. Of course, coming to us from the main show, No More Room in Hell, it is Mr. Derek B. How you doing, Derek?
Hey, yo. Scream 7 sucked.
Well, now we know how Razor Ramon feels about Scream 7, but that's a discussion for another show. And also joining us, coming to us from Fresh Cuts and the Horror Countdown podcast, it is Mr. Don Anelli. How you doing, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
Before we actually get into this month's feature, there was one little tiny piece of collecting news that I wanted to go into. Anybody who's ever listened to any of my shows or has followed me for any amount of time knows that I am a big Funko Pop collector. And when I say big, I mean it. I have over 1,100 pieces in my personal collection. Yes, I have a problem. But the fact of the matter is, I wanted to talk about a release that's actually coming this week. Unfortunately, the episode will probably come out after the release. So hopefully it doesn't sell out for you diehard fans. But then again, if you're a diehard Godzilla fan, you probably know about this release. So this coming Wednesday, March 4th, I believe is the exact date, Amazon.com will be dropping an exclusive Godzilla pop. And it's a pop. I can't say that it's a pop I've been waiting for, but when I saw the first glam shots of it, it made me smile so much. And it is, of course, Dancing Godzilla from Godzilla versus Megalon, I believe, right?
Monster Zero.
Oh, Monster Zero, my bad. The pop is labeled as Godzilla 1965. It doesn't actually give the movie title, but yeah. Godzilla dancing, his little victory dance that he does there near the end of the film. That is the Funko Pop that's going to be coming out this Wednesday. As I already said, it will be an Amazon.com exclusive. I don't know the exact time of the drop, if it's like midnight or 9 a.m. Pacific or whatever the case may be. So I would say any diehard Godzilla collectors out there, if you're looking for this one, as soon as you get up Wednesday morning, go ahead and check Amazon and see if that link is active. There is a link available currently, but it's not active yet. So I would imagine once they drop it, the link will be active. So I will be buying as many as Amazon will allow me to buy. For those who don't know, I am also a reseller. So I do have online stores on both Mercari and whatnot. If you use either of those marketplace sites, go ahead and look for Mr. Venom's store. I am on both those sites. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I was really, really excited. I'm excited anytime a Godzilla pop comes out, but this is just a single standalone, almost goofy Godzilla, and like I said, I'm okay with it. All right, folks. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this month's creature feature. This one was picked by our friend Don, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to him and let him introduce this month's feature film.
All right. Well, today we are going to be looking at something that I think is kind of an overlooked gem. I'll explain a little bit more about that for my proper initial thoughts. But we're going to be looking at 1959's The Giant Behemoth.
Gentlemen, we are witnessing a biological chain reaction, a geometrical progression of deadly menace.
Look there. 2 points off the port bow.
We must find a way of destroying this creature in one piece. Judging by the beast's size, I would say it was powerful enough to drive a battleship.
Of course, its tremendous electric charge is what projects the radiation. That's what makes the creature so deadly.
Well, have you any concrete suggestions?
Yes. First, block off the Thames.
Yes, very
Behemoth.
excited to talk about this one. Now, the movie is only an hour and 20 minutes, so it is a quick watch, an hour and 19 to be exact, but this is coming to us from 1959. This is before we had the MPAA ratings board, so it doesn't have an actual movie rating. It was just called approved. You know, everything was either approved or not approved back then, but very little was not approved, but that's a story for another podcast. This one, as I said, is coming to us from 1959, 5 years after a certain giant monster movie came out of Japan and pretty much changed the world. So is this a product of Godzilla's popularity? We'll find out as we discuss the movie. So our synopsis is as follows. Marine atomic tests cause changes in the ocean's ecosystem, resulting in dangerous blobs of radiation and the resurrection of a dormant dinosaur that threatens London. Replace London with Tokyo, and that description sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? All right, this one is directed and written by Eugene Laurie. It stars Gene Davis, Andre Morell, and John Turner. As I've said, this one came to us from Don as he had our pick this month. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over back to Don so that he could be the first to give our general thoughts. Don, go ahead and let the folks know what you think of the Giant Behemoth.
So yeah, this was one that I was introduced to very, very, very early on in my movie watching days. Initially, I got wind of this through a compilation tape called Fantastic Dinosaurs of the Movies, which
Wow.
I love that tape to death. I still remember the exact order of every film on that compilation. There's so many films from that disc that I've only managed to actually not see 3 of them. There's only 3 that I haven't seen to this date, just because for whatever reasons, either unavailability, they're just not that easy to come by, or I'm not that interested. Anyways, again, not on topic, but Giant Behemoth was one that I actually found out through there, even though it's one of the big films in there, but it wasn't one that stuck out to me. It wasn't until a few years after I got the tape that I actually managed to find it. I actually was looking for another movie, and I found Giant Behemoth instead. It was one that I remember from the tape, but it wasn't one that I had really stood out to me, so I kind of wasn't really that interested in finding it. But when I first watched it, I was actually really impressed with it. I think there's a lot that this does that I see a lot of, famous monster films that follow this formula because it is, pretty much the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms switched to England and given, just a few slight tweaks here and there. The plot of the film is exactly the same, but the one thing that I like about it, and it's the one that I really value the most about the film, is basically the idea of the discovery of the creature. I love the first half to this. I think the series of tests, the series of events that signal the creature's existence, the way that they prove it, all the different scientific methods, all the different, we'll talk a little bit later, but everything that we see in that first half, I just love. I love the way that it draws you in. I love that it's this mystery about this sea beast that terrorizes the small series of towns on the English coast, and it leads to the monster's appearance in the city, and you get a decent rampage. I mean, I actually really like the way that this gives us a solid rampage. The destruction's not as big as you'd think, but you still see the creature walking in the buildings, and you still see a few things here and there. You actually do get to see the creature inflict damage on mankind. It's one of the few creatures that actually goes out of its way and kills human beings. And it's just small little stuff like that that kind of makes it stand out for me just ever so slightly. I like the ones that just do things ever so differently from everything else. And the one thing that, again, I'll say this: the plot of this is not original. The plot of this is not all of that, creative or unique. It's beat for beat the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And, I'll save that for later, but, it's still just a fun time. And it highlights the one issue that I think, even if you don't have familiarity with Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it does highlight the one issue where nothing it does is really spectacular enough to really push it over the edge into being the B movie that it is. And to me, I think that's kind of why like I said, it's a little underrated. And okay, yeah, it's a fun film for what it is, but again, it's the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is a near flawless movie. So why watch this one when you got Beast from 20,000 Fathoms right there? That's kind of where I land with this, is that it's almost, I don't want to say that it's almost a bad thing that it's, as formulaic as it is, but it is to the film's detriment because it doesn't stand out that much. And it is the one thing that I think holds it back from being, it's not going to be like a great film, because I do think that there are a few things here and there within it, but that do kind of hold it back. But yeah, overall, it's a fun time. I like the design of the monster. I like the way he moves. Stop motion, but it's still, it has an identity to it. It has a, you can still give it, like the personality. So it stands out in that regard. But yeah, it's just one of those where it's a good film, but it's just not a great film. And it's almost sad that it borders, two great films, because the film after this is Gorgo, which we covered earlier on Underwater Kaiju. So, it's kind of one of those where there's better films out there that do the same thing this does. So it kind of hampers it in, comparison. But I still have fun with it, and I still think it's a fun time. And, there's still a lot of things I like about it. So, yeah, I guess I'll say back to you, Venom.
Excellent. All right, Derek, come on in here, buddy. What do you think of the Giant Behemoth?
Weirdly enough, I knew about this movie the same way Don did. I had that same VHS. That's fucking funny. Yeah, I remember seeing like the trailer for this on that VHS. Yeah, giant dinosaur. I'm in. I didn't get to see it till like years later. And I kind of agree with a lot of Don's points that it is kind of like a British version of The Beast and 20,000 Phantoms, which weirdly enough, because it's from the same director too, and everything. Eugene Laurie he directed Beast from 20,000 Phantoms, which ironically is the movie that inspired Godzilla. So I weirdly enough, the thing that I always dug about the movie is like you get to see like what this monster actually does with its like the radiation, like the after effects on humans and like those like blobs that are on like the fucking beach and shit. And that stuff is to me is kind of cool for that day and age. You never really got the well, maybe like movies like we covered Tarantula, but that was like hormones that was doing that. The people were injecting to themselves. So it's a little different, but you still like see like after effects, like the radiation burns or kind of the most horrific part of the movie, which you didn't really get to see in Beast and 20,000 Phantoms because maybe they just didn't have the time and ideas. But I actually really love the cast of this movie. We got like Gene Evans, who I've seen in a few things before, mostly like westerns and war movies, I think. But yeah, and then you got fucking my favorite Dr. Watson ever, Andre Morell, who we actually covered. He was in the Plague of the Zombies Venom that we covered on No More Room in Hell a while back. He was like the zombie killer slayer guy. The guy is awesome, man. Yeah, but yeah, I remember him from playing my favorite Dr. Watson in The Hammer Hound of the Baskervilles with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Great movie if you haven't seen it, if you like that kind of stuff. I love the stop motion in this. I I did notice some of like the close-ups of the monster's face kind of reminded me of like some of the goofiness of the Black Scorpion, which isn't a bad thing. It's just like age and some of the materials they use. I'm not saying that's terrible in some of those shots, but it's kind of noticeable that look, oh, it's a claymation. That's all I meant by when I was talking off air to the guys. I wanted to kind of clarify that for them and me. But yeah, I love like some of like the rampage stuff that Don was talking about. Like even like seeing like people reacting while they're running. That's all you really need, like in like these type of movies, which is actually one of the better things that another movie that we covered on Underwater Kaiju, Young Gary, like some of the reactions of like the small humans when young Gary's destroying the city. That's some of my favorite shit in that movie. And you know, like that's a fucking terrible fucking movie. You know what I mean? But it kind of reminded me of that sense, or you get like reactions of like the actual townspeople while this rampage is going on, which I kind of dig. I dig that a lot of like the giant monster movies of the time. And yeah, it's a breezy watch. There is some very like British dialogue heavy scenes where, if you're not used to that for like I am, but I'm saying for like other viewers of this movie, I think that maybe just take a step back because it's not like that snappy like American dialogue that you see in like movies like Beast from 20,000 Phantoms or like even like some of the early like Ray Harryhausen movies. It's kind of more like British in that sense, kind of like a slow burn, like Hammer, like X, the Unknown Terror type dialogue, which maybe is a movie we'll cover one day on this show. But yeah, overall, the Giant Behemoth, I dig it. It's a fun ride, and it's worth a watch. It's good stuff. I actually agree that it is kind of a little bit of an underrated gem from the late 50s. So yeah,
Nice.
That's all I got to really say.
Excellent. All right. Well, for me, surprise, surprise, this is a first time watch for me. I had heard of the Giant Behemoth for many, many years, but it was just one of those movies I never got around to seeing. So I'm glad that Don picked this one. It gave me an opportunity to watch it. And overall, I enjoyed it. I will say the movie does have its issues, but first, let's start with what I liked about it. The cast, I agree with Derek. I think this is a great cast, and a couple of other people that Derek didn't mention. Lee Madison as our female lead, who granted doesn't have the biggest part in this movie, but I will say she's a beautiful blonde and not hard to look at all. So that always and they don't pigeonhole a romance in here. Like it's very obvious that she has some kind of relationship with one of the younger fishermen, but they don't really hammer it home or kind of force feed it to us. It's the kind of thing where you can make the connection yourself, or if you miss it, it's not a big deal. It doesn't have any impact on the story. The other actor that I wanted to bring up was Jack McGowan. Now, Jack actually is in my favorite movie of
The
all
Exorcist,
time.
yeah.
The Exorcist as Burt Dennings, a pivotal role. Even though, again, he doesn't have a lot of screen time, the fact that he is one of Reagan's only victims in that movie makes him, a fairly, especially that scene that he has with the German, or actually the Austrian
I'm Swiss.
caretaker. Oh, he's Swiss. That's right. I knew he wasn't German, even though Burt Dennings was always accusing him of being a Nazi. I know it's off-putting and not really a cool thing to do, but it always tickles me. So, and then of course, the fact that he's, one of the only victims of possessed Reagan in that movie just makes him a standout to me.
That was his last movie too, which is nuts.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as soon as I saw him here, it instantly reminded me of my favorite movie ever. So of course, it instantly makes me enjoy this movie a little bit more. Unfortunately, he plays Dr. Sampson, a paleontologist here, who doesn't get a whole lot of screen time and unfortunately is dispatched fairly soon after he's introduced, but it's still always great to see him. So I'm very happy. I wish we would have gotten to see a little bit more of that helicopter crash. I was fully expecting the monster to do one of those, big leaps out of the water and pull the helicopter down. If they filmed that movie today, I would imagine that scene would be in there all CGI'd to, perfection. Well, perfection to some anyway. But yeah, like I said, overall, I absolutely enjoyed this cast. I thought the creature design was great. I honestly didn't notice any goofiness to the close-ups of the monster until Derek mentioned it. And then after that, I started focusing on the eyes of the creature during those close-ups. And yeah, I won't go so far as to say googly-eyed by any stretch, but I do see some of the silliness that Derek is seeing. But overall, I think this is a great-looking creature for 1959. For a lower budget, sci-fi creature feature from the late 50s, I think, this isn't them or Godzilla by any stretch of the imagination. And as everybody has already said, it's not even Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. So it's definitely a step down from that tier of creature feature. But overall, once the action starts, I'm on board. Now, the things that I think the movie doesn't do as well, the pacing. Unfortunately, the second half of the first act and most of the second act are very slow. It's a lot of, I don't want to go so far as to say police procedural, but let's say scientific procedural, where we've got these two atomic scientists investigating both the death of a local fisherman and the death of thousands of fish that washed up on shore the day after that local fisherman was killed. So we've got a lot of procedural stuff in here, investigation stuff, things like that, which for some people works. And I'm usually one of those people, but I just found myself wondering where the creature was after a while. Just to give you a couple of stats, our movie is an hour and 20 minutes long. The first even partial sighting of the creature is at the 39-minute mark. And then the first full image of the creature is at the 51-minute mark. Mind you, 51 minutes, that's less than half an hour left in the film. And again, that kind of fits with the formula of kind of lower budget sci-fi creature features of the time. So I'm not necessarily complaining, but I definitely, when the movie was over, it left me wanting more of the creature. I would have liked to have seen maybe one more rampage scene. Maybe not in London, maybe like the town, the fishing town there where, the original fisherman was killed. Maybe a small rampage there just to kind of get us geared up for the bigger rampage in London. I would have liked to have seen that a little bit. Definitely would have liked to have seen a little bit more carnage. But again, we're talking about 1959, not a lot of on-screen death in this one other than radiation poisoning. And I do agree with Derek that I think the after effects of the radiation attacks do look great. I mean, they look legitimate. I've seen pictures of actual radiation poisoning, and they actually do a pretty good job here of recreating that, especially in 1959, where they're maybe not as familiar with what radiation poisoning looks like as we are today.
Or even makeup, you know what I mean?
Great makeup job. Absolutely. Totally agree. Now, another thing that I kind of wish the movie would have gotten into a little bit more was the science. There's very little science in this movie. And specifically, what I would have liked to have heard more about was how this creature weaponizes radiation. Now, this creature is obviously born of, radiation and bomb testing and things like that. But this creature didn't emit radiation. Like if the creature was just kind of standing around and you had a Geiger counter, it wouldn't affect it. But the creature has the ability to weaponize its radiation where it can actually shoot it. Maybe not shoot it, but it kind of emits this very bright light that's blinding light. And if you're in the vicinity of that light, you instantly get radiation poisoning, to the point where some people literally fell as dried up corpses. Like before their bodies even hit the ground, they were just, they got such a concentrated dose of radiation. Whereas some of the earlier victims in the movie maybe got more of a passing dose of the radiation. Because our initial kill, the fisherman in the local town, he doesn't die right away. He dies the next day. Obviously, in London, where the creature is just going crazy, it's just putting out full blasts of radiation and just killing people by the droves. So that, again, I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about that. Like with Godzilla emits radiation. If you're standing next to Godzilla, you're going to get radiation poisoning. But with this thing, it's not constantly emitting radiation. So I would have liked to, even if the explanation didn't make a lot of sense, because obviously in 1959, trying to explain weaponized radiation might come off as kind of goofy. I still would have liked to have seen the attempt, though, because
there's the scene when they're visiting the paleontologist, and he says that the beast has an electric current similar to an electric eel.
Right.
But I'm saying is that he makes the connection that because the beast has has an electrical charge like an eel, instead of projecting electricity, it projects the radiation outwards.
Right. I guess it gives me an explanation more on the weaponization, but why does he not emit radiation when he's just standing around? Like his bones, everything about him is so irradiated.
But they also say that over the course of the film, he's burning himself out.
Right. Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to talk about too, was the fact that he was slowly dying and the whole plot that they come up with to try to kill it, to try to speed up the process, if you will. I definitely caught that. I caught which I like. I liked when, because that's realistic. When something is that irradiated, it's gonna slowly die. Like, not everything can be Godzilla. And hell, we've even seen Godzilla succumb to his radiation on multiple occasions.
Massive heartburn,
Yeah,
exactly. Massive heartburn.
I mean, if I was to offer an explanation for what you're saying about the lack of radiation, there is the scene where they're tracking it on the boat, and they do catch it with the Geiger counter, and that's how they know the creature's there and where to track it. And then the creature disappears, and the Geiger counter disappears.
Damn.
No, valid. I'll go with that, but I got to think, because of how the rest of the movie goes along, that was the creature actually purposely sending out radiation. I don't know that it was actually attacking the boat. I think it was too far away from the boat, because they only saw it in a passing glance through binoculars. So it couldn't have been all that close to the boat.
But then when you look at it in, in London, the proximity, they're like, 20, 30, 40 feet away from it.
Yeah, sometimes closer. I mean, in one scene, it actually crushes a car, and you actually see a couple of people run by as it crushes the car. And it's like, how are they not, how do they not have cancer now? You know what I mean? So that was all. It's a minor gripe. Ultimately, it's not a major thing. I'm just trying to pull out stuff that I can talk about with this movie, because ultimately it's a fairly simple story. It's not anything too original. We've seen it before multiple times.
I know what could have made it better.
What's that?
During the radiation scene where and when it's blinding everybody with its light, they should have put, we should edit in "blinded by the light."
Too modern. You got to pick a song that actually existed in 1959. There's got to be an old pop standard that talks about, radiation or something.
And all I got to say about Don's point of this movie, at least they didn't describe it as a battleship. I've seen movies where they describe a giant claw as a battleship.
Yeah, that's a little silly. At least, and I also liked how we didn't get a lot of skepticism. We did get some skepticism, like when they first talk to the police. When Dr. Carnes is actually speaking to the police, you see one of the cops kind of make a silly face. The same thing happens, I think, the first time that Carnes brings it up to Bickford, to Andre Morel's character. I think you get the same kind of thing where he kind of makes this face like, oh, really? You think it's a monster? Blah, blah, blah. But I like that they didn't lean into the skepticism, because that's one of those tropes that just kind of bothers me. It's like, why are we spending screen time with people who don't believe what's going on just to watch them die later in, a guilty pleasure type kill? Like, I don't need that, especially in these classic creature features. I don't need that. So the lack of skepticism was nice. The lack of a forced romance, the lack of misogyny, which is also something that we've talked about a lot on this show with movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s. Like I said, there's really only one major female character in the movie, and she is treated with, very respectfully. So, I like that. Yeah, I mean,
This movie's been in the 80s. Would have been like, sorry, your dad died, but let's fuck right now.
Yeah, it would have definitely been a little bit more 9.5 weeks, I would imagine. But
imagine Mickey Rourke in this.
Oh God, no. I don't want to imagine Mickey Rourke at all. Mickey Rourke, excuse me. Anyway,
he should have played the Giant Behemoth.
Oh, well, that would be okay. And that's something else that I kind of, not to say that I just noticed it with this movie, but it was the kind of thing where it kind of struck me as odd, where it seems like in America, the creature features are more like prosthetics, they're puppets, they're, stop motion, props, things like that. Whereas Toho really leaned into the guy in the suit. And I think that even in 1954, the guy in the suit just looks great. Like I'm actually surprised that American filmmakers didn't jump on that concept sooner. It seemed like all through the 50s and 60s, we still kept going with the stop motion, the props, things like that. It seems like they didn't really take any lessons from Toho, which is really unfortunate, because I think go ahead, Don.
I was going to say, well, you look at the one attempt that they did, and you have Unknown Islands. The suits look like shit.
Oh, valid, absolutely. But I'm saying is
that when you look at what the climate would have been like back then, you wouldn't have been. You look at the way that the Japanese movies were treated when they first came over. Not to say that it was warranted, but you look at the treatment that they got from the American distributors. You look at that versus how they treated their own homegrown monster movies. They gave them a little bit more respect, a little bit more class, a little bit more dignity compared to the Japanese versions of those movies. So you would have seen them treating the techniques to create the monsters in the same manner. You look at the stop motion, that would have been like, the big prestigious, well, it's a hardworking American style, spit on your hands, grit it down, and just, bear how long it's going to take to film it, versus, oh, well, it's just a guy in a suit. Well, you can do that in 5 minutes.
Hell, even fucking the remake of The Lost World from like the 60s with Claude Rains, they just used giant lizards and super glued fucking fins on them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, another factor probably could be money. Like, I don't know what it costs to actually make an effective creature suit that an actual human can wear and, be able to walk around. I would imagine it's a lot like today, where CGI is cheaper than practical effects. I would imagine that stop motion was probably cheaper than making an entire suit, especially if the suit is only for one movie, At least with Godzilla, since they had so many movies, they could reuse suits periodically. As long as it looked good, they could reuse the suit. Maybe the cost of making, and especially because this is a 4-legged creature, I would imagine you'd have to make a suit that houses 2 people, so that you could have, all 4 legs moving independently. And Lord knows what that would have looked like on screen. I guess we can get into the story a little bit. I'm not going to do a walkthrough by any stretch. I mean, we've already talked about multiple elements of the story. Our movie opens with a local fisherman getting attacked by something that's emitting a bright light. He ends up getting radiation poisoning and dying the next day. That day, locals notice thousands of dead fish on the beach. This gets the attention of a couple of members of the Atomic Council, I think is what they call it in the movie. Men who work, with atomic energy, work with, bombs and all of that. One of them specifically, of course, Steve Carnes, who we see at the beginning of the movie giving a dissertation on that exact subject. And so he's obviously our expert. Once he hears the reports of all the dead fish on the beach, and then hears how one of the locals said that they saw a creature coming out of the water, instantly it piques his interest. And I'll give him credit, without hesitation, he goes right to the town. He basically drags along one of his colleagues. And, that's where kind of our movie goes from there. It goes into the investigation part. They test the water, they test the dead fish. Eventually, they do find an irradiated fish and realize that this thing is somehow weaponizing radiation, because every single fish from the area wasn't irradiated, only one or two particular ones. So obviously, this thing is very kind of sparse with his radiation attacks. He doesn't like to abuse them. And even during the rampage in London, he only does it like 2 or 3 times. So it definitely seems like he's aware that the radiation is killing him. And maybe every time he actually uses it as a weapon, it makes him closer to death. Maybe the creature is mildly aware that the radiation is slowly killing him, so he doesn't use the weapon all that often. Hell, maybe if he never used it, he wouldn't have slowly died. Who knows? Again, they don't really get into the science too terribly much here, but, thank God for Jack McGowan to give us the little bit of science that we actually do get.
Yes.
After they do their tests, they realize that there is indeed a creature in the local waters that is attacking people and boats and, the local fish and everything else. Steve Carnes is able to figure out that, yes, this is like a radiation poisoning situation. By the way, did they mention Bikini Atoll in this movie? I thought I heard him say bikini at one point, or maybe I'm wrong. I'm thinking to myself, did he just mention Godzilla? Like, what the fuck? Obviously, Bikini Atoll is an actual real place where the American military tested atomic bombs before they dropped them on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the fact that he mentioned it, I'm like, Godzilla connection. I love it. Even though it's a real world place, it's still pretty cool to hear the reference. So, especially in a movie like this, a specific or irradiated creature feature like this one, I thought that was cool. So eventually, once they realize that the creature is slowly dying, they try to figure out ways to destroy it. Obviously, the military, the first thing they come up with is bombs from above that they can just bomb the shit to oblivion. Carnes is the first one to tell them, no, we can't do that, because don't forget, this creature is irradiated. If you bomb it, little pieces of irradiated flesh are going to go all over London, making London uninhabitable for Lord knows how many years. So obviously that's out of the question. Then they come up with the idea of speeding up the process of its radiation poisoning by weaponizing a torpedo loaded with radium. Yeah, they're actually loading radium into the creature to speed up the process. So, of course, with the help of the British military or the British Navy, they're able to procure a submarine with a torpedo. They're able to add an attachment to it that's basically a giant syringe loaded with radium. And then this is another complaint about the movie, is that I feel like the finale was a little lackluster. Like, basically, we see our heroes in the submarine. They catch up to the creature. We get the underwater scenes of the creature, which were, for the time, pretty decent. They could have done a little bit better to imply that it was underwater, other than just its kind of swimming formation. But, they did what they could. Like I said, I thought it looks pretty good. And then once they get the target in sight, they shoot the torpedo. And what we actually see on screen is the torpedo hits the creature and explodes on impact. So it's obviously layered over each other, the superimposed explosion over our stop motion creature. And then we see the creature kind of writhe around on the water surface for a little bit, and then it just kind of dies. And I would have really liked to have seen a little bit more of an eventful ending with this one. But again, this movie is not really one of those grand creature features where it's going for big scale and big world affecting consequences. This is definitely a localized terror here in London. They kind of keep the scope fairly small, and I'm okay with that. But I would like to have seen a little bit more. And then our movie basically ends with a report from America stating that thousands of dead fish are now washing up on shores all over the eastern seaboard of the States, from Maine all the way down to Florida. Our two, atomic energy guys just kind of look at each other and drive away. Obviously, they're on their way to the next one. And I thought, what a great way to do sequel bait. Like, I've always railed against sequel bait, usually being like a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene in a lot of modern movies. But I thought this one was great the way they did it, where it's just a radio report of more fish getting washed up, more dead fish washing up on shore, and our two protagonists just kind of looking at each other and pretty much without speaking, agreeing that, I guess that's our next stop is the States. I would have loved to call
Raymond Burr.
Yeah. Oh, hey. and of course, this is only 3 years removed from Godzilla King of the Monsters, so it wouldn't have been too unusual to see Raymond Burr here. But at the same time, you're not going to mention a Toho property. You might get sued, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, like I said, overall, for a first time watch, I genuinely enjoyed it, especially after watching Scream 7 earlier today, which I have thoughts about that movie that I'll talk about on Fresh Cuts, but it was nice to kind of come home and watch a nice solid creature feature to kind of wash the taste of Scream 7 out of my mouth. But ultimate sucks. There you go. Razor is a lot less generous than I am. Like, I won't say it sucked, but I will have a lot to say.
To be fair, I didn't actually see it yet. I was just fucking trolling.
Oh, hey, but you've seen the reviews online, you've seen the posts, and you've spoken to a couple of people who've seen it. So I think, more than likely you're going to think the same thing that a lot of us think. But like I said, that's a discussion for another podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my co-hosts and see if these guys have any final closing thoughts on the film. Let's go ahead and start with the man who picked the movie this month, Mr. Don Anelli. Don, any closing thoughts on the Giant Behemoth before we get out of here?
We said pretty much most of what we've need to discuss about it. It's fun for what it is. I mean, it's unfortunately kind of surrounded in Lurier's catalog by far superior versions of films that do this much better. But if you haven't seen any of either of those, and you're curious about this one, or you're just a fan of the genre, you can do a lot worse than this one. There's still a lot to like about it. It's still pretty fun. My personal favorite part of the film is what Venom dislikes about it the most. So, I mean, your interest in the film is going to vary based on, how you take to this kind of stuff. But yeah, like I said, you could do a lot worse than this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Derek, final thoughts?
Now, my real question is, do you think that the Japanese scientists from Terror Mechagodzilla picked up this monster's body and made it into Titanosaurus?
You're grasping at straws, but I love it, so I'm okay.
And that's really the true sequel of this movie.
It's funny because as I was watching this movie, before we actually got the full shot of the creature, when we just got like some passing shots, I'm like, wow, kind of looks like Godzilla and Anguirus had a baby. And that would make sense because this movie is 4 years after Godzilla raids again. So maybe they had a love child.
Makes that fight scene, makes you rethink their fight scene. A
little bit. Maybe they weren't fighting.
Funny thing is that this one actually came out before then, because Godzilla Raids Again didn't hit American theaters until 59.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's why I was mentioning King of the Monsters coming out here in 56. It's a lot closer to, here in the States, whereas, this is a UK movie. So But yeah, I definitely think that there's some connections. Like Derek said, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms inspired Godzilla, and then Godzilla turns around and inspires a whole slew of creature features from the 50s and 60s and beyond. I mean, right up to today.
And this movie's like just some British producer to on the Frenchman Eugene Loret. Eugene, do what you did before. I make him British now.
I love it. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for Creature Comforts episode 47. And that'll put a close to our discussion on 1959's The Giant Behemoth. If you haven't seen it yet, as I mentioned earlier, it is available for free on Plex. If you don't have Plex, go ahead and download the app. You don't even have to create an account. You literally download the app, do a search for Giant Behemoth, and you'll find it there, along with a slew of other movies, too. So I do recommend the Plex app. Whether you have a friend who has a personal server or not, or you're just using the generic Plex as it comes, there's still a lot of movies out there that aren't available anywhere else. So check it out. And like I said, that's going to do it for episode 47. So on behalf of Derek B. and Don Anelli, this is Mr. Venom, thanking you all for joining us. And I promise the next episode will not be late. I know this is the second episode in a row that we've released late, but unfortunately life happens, work happens, and schedules conflict. So
should we announce it?
I think we can, since we're going to have a quick turnaround, or we're going to try to have a quick turnaround.
Return of Bird Eye Gordon too.
The return of Bird Eye Gordon, yes. So this is my pick coming up, and I decided to pick one that I have seen once or twice, but it would have been a lot closer to its release date of 1976. So next month, episode 48, we're going to be looking at Food of the Gods. Yes, giant monsters run amok, or giant creatures run amok. I shouldn't say monsters, since they are just normal creatures that are just gigantic. But yeah, that's going to be fun. Food of the Gods. Look for that before the end of March. And again, apologies for the late episodes, but that's going to do it for episode 47. So again, thank you all so much for joining us and spending your time with us. Let's go ahead and say bye to the folks.
Later.
Blinded by the light.
Anyway, see you next month.